Use headphones for best experience.
They kept Sergei in quarantine for days. In a canvas medical tent at the perimeter camp, he endured endless decontamination scrubs and terse interrogations. When he wasn't being prodded by doctors in hazmat suits, he sat shivering under a heat lamp, replaying the nightmare images of the village in his mind. He told the officials everything: the feeding abomination at the table, the soldier half-eaten by the cellar, the girl-faced thing at the well. He told them about the chain of infected and the sudden convulsions that struck them all. By the time Sergei described the ground collapsing into a sinkhole, the interview room had fallen silent. The officers exchanged knowing looks. They already knew about Site A's collapse, it turned out. In fact, Sergei had been doubly lucky. The chaos that saved him was not mere chance, but a result of another team's desperate actions. A stern colonel explained in clipped tones, "Roughly an hour before you emerged, our forces undertook a strike at a nearby infected village, Site C, about 30 kilometers west. They encountered what seemed to be a central nest of this plague and destroyed it with incendiary fire. Almost immediately, the creatures at your location went berserk and retreated. You witnessed the after effects of our strike." Sergei's mind reeled. A nest? The colonel elaborated that at Site C, soldiers had found a massive spherical growth rising above the village well, composed of interwoven human and animal bodies, throbbing as it released clouds of spores. The team had drenched the sphere in gasoline and burned it, whereupon a monstrous noise, like an explosion and a roar combined, was heard even at their remote perimeter. The sphere detonated, the strike team lost. But that blast seemingly crippled the infected in other villages, at least temporarily. Sergei's description of the convulsions and die-off in Site A confirmed their theory. The flesh plague was connected across distances, wounded in one place, and it recoiled in another. Hearing this gave Sergei a grim sort of hope. They can be hurt, they can be killed. The colonel's sharp eyes flicked to Sergei. "Look, you're a civilian who illegally breached quarantine. Normally that would land you in a cell or a body bag, but..." He rubbed his temples, looking suddenly older. "You've seen more of these things up close than any of my men who lived to talk about it, and you came out clean. I need every bit of intel if we're to end this." Thus, Sergei found himself conscripted into service of the containment force. He didn't resist. In truth, he wanted to help now. The rage that had been smoldering since he lost his family had found a target: the infection itself. If there was a chance, any chance, to save others or avenge the dead, he would take it. By the week's end, after countless blood tests confirmed he carried no trace of the pathogen, Sergei stood suited up in tactical gear alongside a squad of soldiers and researchers. The containment camp buzzed like a beehive around them. The brass had decided on a bold plan: explore the sinkhole at Site A. They suspected it led into a network of tunnels or caverns where the remaining infected had fled. With Site A's surface cleared, now was the time to strike at the heart of the contagion. Operation Source Point, they called it. Sergei was given a choice: remain at camp or join the excursion as a local guide. It took him all of 2 seconds to volunteer. Before the man teams would descend, command sent in drones for reconnaissance. Sergei joined a cluster of officers around a monitor as the first drone, a small remote helicopter rig, was prepared. On screen, a camera feed showed the yawning black mouth of the sinkhole where the mayor's house once stood. The drone operator's voice crackled over the comm: "RSCP-6101 launching now." Sergei wasn't sure what the code stood for, but he watched intently as the video feed tilted and began to descend into the pit. The drone's lights clicked on, revealing earthen walls slick with dangling tatters of flesh like fibrous roots. As it went deeper, the shaft narrowed into a rough, natural tunnel, as if a massive burrowing creature had punched through the earth. Fragments of that pale flesh clung to the tunnel sides but looked dried out and inert here, unlike the vibrant, moving infection above ground. At about 100 meters down, the video showed side passages branching off in multiple directions. Too small for a man to crawl through, they riddled the shaft like wormholes. "Must be where those things squeezed into other areas," a researcher muttered. The deeper the drone went, the more extensive the fleshy coating on the walls became. At 250 meters, the drone leveled out, reaching the bottom of the shaft, where a larger horizontal tunnel led away into darkness. Sergei's pulse quickened. This was it, the underworld where the monsters had gone. The drone carefully glided forward, its rotors echoing. Suddenly, movement flickered on the feed. "Hold up! Got something at 3 o'clock," the operator said. The camera panned and focused. In the stark LED light, they saw a heartbreaking sight, a deer entangled in a snare of fleshy tendrils hanging from the ceiling. The animal was alive, its eyes rolling in panic, legs kicking uselessly. It dangled a few feet above the tunnel floor, silent, its muzzle wrapped in flesh, as if the cave itself had trapped and was slowly digesting it. Sergei swore under his breath. The drone hovered cautiously around the thrashing deer, careful not to touch the sticky tendrils. "Keep moving," ordered the colonel, jaw tight. Further in, the tunnel sloped and curved. The ground under the drone became uneven with bulbous mounds. The remains of villagers who had fled underground after the collapse, now stilled and partially merged into the fleshy floor. Sergei recognized a familiar jacket on one half-absorbed corpse and looked away. The drone feed picked up the sound of running water, growing louder as it advanced. Soon the drone came upon an underground stream cutting across the passage, water rushing with surprising volume. The camera dipped to show the clear, cold water glinting under the lights. To test for contamination, the drone released a small vial into the flow, its beacon blinking as it was carried off. Later analysis would confirm what field kits had hinted. The water was remarkably free of any trace of the infection. It seemed the flesh rot could not taint running water, a fact which gave the team some hope and brought fleeting relief to Sergei's tormented mind. Perhaps the lake and rivers beyond might be safe. The tunnel forked not far beyond the stream. One path wound upward toward a distant pinprick of light above, while the main route continued downward into deeper shadow. On command, the drone steered up toward the light to reconnoiter. As it ascended a narrow incline, one of its rotor blades grazed a hanging mass of fleshy wall. The feed showed a smear of offal and a gash left in the living tissue, which to everyone's astonishment began healing over within seconds, sealing the wound as if it had never been. "This stuff, it's alive all through here," Sergei whispered, earning a nod from a pale-faced researcher. The drone pressed on and emerged out of a concealed cave mouth onto a windswept mountainside. The camera panned over a cluster of ruined cabins and huts half buried in snow. "Site B," the officers murmured. Another known village that had gone silent, now found directly above this tunnel network. Heku, but Site B's buildings looked different. They were entirely overgrown with layers of dead flesh, as if constructed of it. No movement showed on thermal scans. Whatever had happened there, it was long devoid of life. The drone lingered only briefly in the howling wind. It was too risky to attempt an outside recovery in that terrain, and turned back downward. Moments into its return journey, the audio picked up a low rumbling roar reverberating from the depths. The control signal crackled. Something was interfering. On the monitor, static bars danced and the video sputtered. "We're losing it," said the operator, frantically adjusting antennae. The picture cleared for an instant, showing the drone dropping rapidly now, descending the tunnel as if pulled. Sergei's heart skipped. What was happening? Then the camera stabilized, and for one horrifying moment they all saw it. Rushing up from below was an enormous human face, distorted and featureless. It was 20 times larger than any normal person's head. Its eyeless sockets and gaping maw sculpted wholly from the sinewy, rust-colored flesh material. Gasps filled the tent. The drone opened fire with its small onboard machine gun, tracer rounds sparking as they hit the colossal face. The bullets did nothing. The flesh absorbed the impacts, closing the wounds almost instantly. In the next heartbeat, the monstrous face engulfed the drone, and the feed cut to black. A stunned silence followed. Sergei realized he was gripping the edge of the table so hard his knuckles had gone white. What had he just seen? A giant face with no eyes, like the one he thought he glimpsed pushing from the sinkhole before he fled. It was real, it was down there, and it was fast. "We'll send another drone," an engineer said shakily. But before they could, the feed bizarrely returned, just like the rover Herbie had hours after being swallowed by that girl-faced creature. The screen flickered on, showing the drone's camera moving erratically through some enormous subterranean chamber. The limited light revealed structures in the gloom, perhaps buildings or pillars, swarming with hundreds of shambling figures. The image skewed as if the drone was being carried or dragged, and then a wave of fleshy tissue washed over the lens. The video died for good. The colonel cursed under his breath, then turned to the assembled team. "Now we know what's waiting. There's an entire colony down there, possibly the source of this hell." He paused, gauging the room. "We've been given the go-ahead for a full assault excursion. We'll set up a forward base at the bottom of the sinkhole and clean house tunnel by tunnel if we have to." He looked at Sergei, who felt both fear and grim anticipation swirling inside him. "If you want out, now's the time," the colonel offered. Sergei shook his head. "I'm coming," he replied firmly. His nightmares were down in those caverns. He would not rest until he saw an end to them or to himself. Within hours, 5 teams prepared to descend. 3 were heavily armed assault units outfitted with flamethrowers and high-powered rifles. The other 2 consisted of scientists and engineers to gather samples and set up an underground operations base. Sergei was attached to Alpha Assault Team. As evening fell, they convoyed to Site A's ruins. Sergei felt a jolt seeing his village again, now eerily quiet under fresh layers of snow, lit by the harsh glare of floodlights. The sinkhole yawned at the center of the debris field, a ragged wound in the earth rimmed by frozen flesh chunks. Using portable cranes and pulleys, they began lowering equipment and then personnel into the abyss. Sergei's turn came. Strapped into a harness, he descended with 2 soldiers flanking him. They were armed with flamethrower flame units and joked darkly about roasting anything that moved. The deeper they went, the warmer it became. Humid air wafted up, carrying the stench of rot. Sergei tried not to gag inside his respirator. At the bottom, he stepped off onto solid ground that squished like a sponge. The tunnel junction was lit by portable lamps as more men in gear were ferried down. Soon, Cavern HQ was established in a wide area just beyond the sinkhole shaft, essentially a rocky atrium with 3 primary passages branching off. One passage angled upward, back towards Site B's mountain village. Another led west following the subterranean stream, and the main route headed roughly south, presumed to connect toward the large chamber glimpsed on the drone feed. They also noted the ancient decaying flesh on the cavern supports, long dried and integrated with the rock. It seemed this infection had been here far longer than anyone realized. For the first several kilometers, things were eerily quiet. The assault teams took point, flamethrowers ready, but encountered only inert clumps of fleshy residue on walls which they promptly torched. The material sizzled and blackened, but did not regrow or retaliate. Researchers examined some and found it dead or dormant, perhaps still weak from the psychic shock of the Site C nest's destruction days ago. Or maybe this part of the tunnels was not alive in the same way. Sergei trudged along, flamethrower fuel tank heavy on his back, rifle in his hands. His breath echoed in his mask. He couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, though their sweeps turned up nothing. As they advanced, he observed the fleshy coating on the tunnel walls growing thicker and more vibrant, pulsing slightly as if with a heartbeat. The floor too became softer underfoot, until they were practically walking on a carpet of meat. The sight was grotesque, yet strangely subdued. No enemy had yet shown itself. Overhead, water dripped. The underground river ran alongside them for a time, then diverged into its own channel separated by rock. Out of caution, a few men followed its bank in case it led to an exit or looped back, but radioed back that it kept curving away, so command ordered them to regroup and stick to the main tunnel. At about 20 kilometers in, Sergeant Anton, leading Alpha Team, halted at a wide spot where the tunnel ceiling arched high. "We need wheels," he grumbled. The trek was taking a toll. Indeed, hauling supplies so far in was exhausting, so HQ arranged for a remote-controlled transport buggy to be sent down the sinkhole and up to their position. They hunkered down to wait, forming a defensive perimeter. Sergei sipped water from his canteen, marveling at how ordinary and human the soldiers' banter sounded in this ghastly place. After a couple of hours, the battery-powered buggy trundled up, loaded with additional fuel and ammunition. The men gave a tired cheer at its arrival. The reprieve was short-lived. As the teams geared up to move out again, a sudden commotion came from the darkness ahead. "Contact front," someone shouted, but nothing was front until it was on them. From the fleshy tunnel walls themselves, shapes began to detach and lunge at the team. Sergei whirled and saw what had appeared to be part of the wall unfurl into a hulking creature, all bulging muscle and no recognizably human feature. It swung a lumpy appendage like a club, sending two men flying. All around, more forms were emerging silently from the meat walls, ambushing them without so much as a snarl or warning. "Light 'em up!" Anton roared. Flamethrowers whooshed, jets of fire illuminating the cavern in hellish light. Sergei caught a full view of one attacker. It resembled a twisted amalgam of several people, fused into a single giant torso that crawled on many mismatched arms. It had no head, only a gaping, lamprey-like maw studded with human teeth in its center. He gave it a burst from his flamethrower, and it recoiled, wailing. Gunfire rattled as others emptied magazines into the writhing attackers. The cave devolved into chaos. Flickering firelight, shouts, the screams of men and monsters. Sergei stepped in as something slick and nearly fell. One of his teammates lay dead at his feet, throat crushed by a surprise attacker. A sinewy tendril whipped out of the dark and wrapped around Sergei's ankle, yanking him off balance. He crashed onto his back, losing his grip on his rifle. The thing in the shadows began dragging him swiftly toward the wall. Sergei fumbled at his belt, grabbing a hand flare. His flamethrower nozzle was bent from the fall, leaking fuel. In the nick of time, he ignited the flare's blazing magnesium and jabbed it at the mass coiled around his ankle. With a violent twitch, the tendril let go, reeling back into a vaguely humanoid shape that caught a flame and thrashed away shrieking. All around, similar battles raged. The infected creatures attacking them had minimal recognizable features. No eyes, odd limbs, swollen bodies, as if spontaneously generated by the fleshy environment itself as a defense mechanism. Their stealth approach cost the team dearly. One soldier stumbled too close to the subterranean river's edge, and a bulbous monster shoved him into the churning black water, where he was swept away in seconds with a fading scream. Another two were pulled into the darkness by their attackers and simply vanished from sight. In minutes, the assault team of 10 had been roughly halved, but the remaining soldiers rallied, forming a tight back-to-back circle, flames and bullets fanning out. The creatures, vulnerable to fire, fell back squealing as they were torched one by one. Sergei picked up a fallen comrade's flamethrower and joined Anton in purging the last hideous blob clinging to the ceiling. With a final gurgling hiss, it dropped, charred and lifeless. Then, as abruptly as it began, the ambush was over. The tunnels echoed with the fading crackle of flames and the ragged panting of survivors. "Report!" Anton barked. Roll call revealed 4 men dead or missing, swept into the unknown by the stream. Among them, to Sergei's dismay, was Corporal Gavril, the one soldier who had shown him a photo of his newborn son just hours before. 2 others were injured, one badly with a punctured lung. The medic injected morphine and shook his head. The man wouldn't last long in these conditions. They gave him as comfortable a position as possible on the buggy. Strapping the body to the buggy for evacuation was futile. The precious vehicle itself had nearly been upended in the fight. Instead, they re-established radio contact with the base camp. Through static, they relayed the situation. "Understood. No turning back," crackled the colonel's voice eventually. "Find those men if you can. Otherwise, continue the mission. The priority is the source of the infection." Sergei could hear the strain in their commander's tone. They all knew the lost men were likely beyond saving, but perhaps not beyond learning their fate.
End of Chapter 2. To be continued.